welcome to my knit vlog. This is episode 2. Today I thought I would tell you something about my story starting to knit. I've been knitting for more than 30 years. I am 43 and I don't remember learning how to knit. It's kind of like when you think back and think, do you ever remember not being able to read? Some of you might be able to remember learning how to read, but actually most people don't remember learning to read. And for me it's the same with knitting. I don't remember learning to knit. I asked my mom a couple of years back if she remembered who learned me how to knit, because both of my grandmas were knitters, each in their own way. My maternal grandmother was a hand knitter, knitted a lot of socks and a lot of shoes. Her house was kind of cold in the winter, so it was nice when you were visiting them that you could put something on your feet so you didn't freeze. My cousin loved her home knitted socks, so she kept her with socks almost all year round. My grandmother on my father's side had a knitting machine, so she knitted kind of like the upper part of the sweater or the cardigan. She had this very beautiful pattern that when I had children I inherited. I think 2 or 3 of these small sweaters that she did with a very specific lace pattern on up here, and then the rest of the sweaters or cardigans were knitted on the machine. So that was a lot what she would do. I also inherited some of her yarn. My dad said she would prefer a lot than quality, so more quantity, less quality. So that yarn I've used for blankets and bags, actually, because it had a lot of synthetic fibers in them, and I don't like that for clothing. My guess is that I was around 6, maybe 7 when I learned how to knit. My first knitting memory is me and my brother sitting in the back of my parents' van. My parents had their own shop where they sold, in the beginning they sold both computer gear, computers, and then they also sold spare parts for motorcycles and all kinds of equipment for motorcycles, the clothes, the helmets, the gloves. I've also sold a lot of stats when I was younger, helping around the shop. But I remember sitting in the back of that van, us going to Germany, because we had to pick up some spare parts from a wholesale place in Germany, and just having learned how to knit, and I had remember them as something like that, plastic knitting needles and a ball of yarn about this size, rainbow colored, and I had learned how to do the how to set up mask, and I was just going back and forth, maybe this wide, just going back and forth until there were no more yarn, and then I would unravel it all and then start over. And I did that all the way from my hometown and all the way to Germany. I think it takes around, must have taken around 3 hours, maybe 4, to go the whole way, and then all the way back again, just knitting same yarn on these little very tacky plastic knitting needles. So that's my first knitting memory. Then I remember having, like, my mom has bought me jumper knitting needles. We call them jumper knitting needles in Danish. I'm not sure it's called the same in English, but the straight ones. And they were in bamboo, and I think they were size 3, maybe 3.5, so quite thin. And my mom had bought me some acrylic yarns from the supermarket, very cheap, and I started just knitting scarves, back and forth, knitting, and then at some point it was long enough, then I bind it off and just gave it to someone. And at some point my mom gave me a circular needle, and then I just did the same, made a lot of masks, and then knitting in the round, going round. I remember my dad for years had this thing, and it was this big. It was really big, this big, and you just do it in a double and use it. And it was teal and white and pink, and you used it for years. Even after I began thinking, now it's really tattered and broken. No, not good. So at some point he must have thrown it away. Maybe not. My dad is kind of like a hoarder, so they have a lot of stuff. I don't remember any particular first project. I don't have like something my mom saved and said, this is the first thing you knitted. So I don't know if it was the scarves that might have been the first thing, and most likely they are gone. I remember trying to make a vest for my younger sister. I had this idea that I wanted to make a vest with kind of a mouse design on one of the side panels of the vest, but I never finished it. Then I remember unraveling it, and I think I made it into a kind of a hat, but I didn't know how to do when you change the colors. You need to wrap the thread around so that it locks in each other. I didn't do that, so the hat was very full of holes, actually. A lot of unwanted lace pattern, I think someone called it recently, which was to die for. So funny. So then I knitted a bit throughout my childhood. I went to here in Denmark we have this kind of like a boarding school, but not like a traditional boarding school. We call them continuation school here in Denmark, and it's very unique because it's a school system where you live at the school, and you often young people chooses to go to continuation school because they have some passion, like classical music or jazz or football or maybe gymnastics. For me it was, you know, knitting, sewing, especially sewing. I was very much into sewing at that point. So I did a lot of sewing at continuation school. And then I learned how to crochet. I think I did a bit of knitting back then, but then when I was done at continuation school, then you end up with your diploma, and you can move on to take an education. And I chose to move away from home and start my education in a city around 30 kilometers from my hometown. And then I took up knitting again because I was living alone and the evenings were sometimes very long, and I'm not very good at sitting still. So I had a lot of small projects. I started to knit some kind of sweater, which I never finished. I took up needlepoint. I did a little bit of sewing, but then at that point I was sewing for 8 hours a day. So when you come home, you don't really feel like sewing again. Then the joy of sewing it vanishes, because sewing stopped being a hobby and became work. It became something where I couldn't, be as creative as I might have been before, because I was learning all the right ways of doing things. So I stopped sewing, and I was young. I was 19, 20 years old, and I was going out with friends. I had a boyfriend who lived more than an hour away in another city, so I often went to his place in the weekends. Did a lot of needlepoint in his apartment while he was working. He was a workaholic. Later on, I married another workaholic, divorced the workaholic, and now I'm married to another workaholic. So my parents are workaholics. So, see a pattern? I do. Well, then I met my first husband, and we, after 2 years of dating and living together, we had our first daughter, and I wanted to make something for her. So first I took up crochet again, and I crocheted a lot of beanies and hats. Then when I was done with the crocheting, I did a lot of animals also, elephants and turtles and stuff. And then I found a book with baby clothes, knitted baby clothes. Then I took up knitting again, and that's where it really took off for me. Knitting things for my daughter, knitting a lot of socks, and knitting kind of like little shoes, knitting blankets. We have a bird's nest here where I'm sitting, so if I get a bit distracted, it's because I have a bird who's currently trying to feed her young, but she's very kind, giving me the space to sit here and flying behind the camera instead of in front of the camera, because I get really scared when they get too close. But we have a bird's nest over here. You can see one around here where I'm sitting. And then we have 2 over here. So a lot of birds nests here in the garden, and maybe you can still hear them singing and chirping on this video. But I think it's charming. Well, after I started knitting for these little shoes, then I started knitting scarves again. A lot of scarves. I sold a lot of the scarves on a web shop along with the knitted shoes and the crocheted animals. And then I, got tired with all these scarves and the booties. I think they're called booties. Please write a comment if I am totally saying the wrong things, because some of these words, I'm not a native English speaker, so there is a lot of words that I have to dig out of my brain to use. I'm hoping that when I do this a little bit more, my vocabulary will become better. That's also one of the reasons why I'm doing this, besides I think it's hilarious. So then back to the story. I started knitting for myself. I started knitting a lot of sweaters. I started, I started blogging about being creative, about my life. Then Instagram came, and that's where, it stepped up another level, because Instagram is so easy to use, and all of a sudden I had this community to talk about my knitting. Now there's 2 birds in here. Let's hope they don't interrupt me too much. So I started, then I got an interest in hand-dyed yarns. I'm not that, I like it, This is hand-dyed, and I have, at this point I have so much yarn that I want the product, but not enough to make things that doesn't make me happy while I'm doing it. The process is also very important to me, but the process can't stand alone for me. So the process needs to keep me in flow. It needs, the colors need to speak to me. I need to be able to see where this is something I can use, so that motivates me too. And that's where I am right now, knitting primarily for myself, because my 2 oldest daughters, they can knit themselves. I have knitted things for them that they have been very excited about, and I have also, knitted things that they didn't use. I am planning, and I have bought the yarn that I am going to do. I think my summer holiday project might be a Celeste sweater by Petite Knit, as she's called in Danish. And I'm trying to motivate myself to do the sweater, because I know when I get started I get totally hooked on it, but it's kind of like, sometimes it's kind of like going to the gym. Some days you are, really excited about it, you are looking forward to going to the gym, to have that me time. For me, going to the gym is kind of like me time. I don't do it as much as I have done before, because right now my life doesn't give me the space to do like going to the gym for 2 hours 2 to 3 times a week. I just don't have the time. Having small children who can't be alone yet, having a job where I have to work from 8 to 4, So, but Celeste sweater from Petite Knit is on my list, and I think the things that I am working on right now is that I want to try different yarns. I want to maybe, you know, do more of the finer stuff, not so many bulky sweaters, and still do dresses, because it's what I use. I use these dresses a lot. I love all my knitted dresses, and it's been a thing for a while, and I don't have a lot, but in the last 2 months I have finished 2 knitted dresses. I have the advantage of not being that tall. I might be, you know, I'm not a extra small, but I'm not that tall, so I can make like this sweater, no, this tee. It's a tee, it's not a sweater, because it doesn't have, you know, it has very small sleeve, very short sleeve, and you're supposed to use 200 grams of mohair silk, mohair, and I have 300 grams. So the last 100 grams is just going to be the length, and I hope to make it all the way down to the knees, because that's my preferred length, to just get to the knees. I am not that tall, so a long dress can be a bit overwhelming, you know, look wise, and they're not very practical, because long dresses, you know, driving a car, I don't appreciate long dresses enough to make them, but who knows, every time I say I'm not going to do something, then I do it anyway, because I have like a whim, and then I do it. That was all for today. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a nice day, and that you will come by another time. Remember to like my video, subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any kind of questions. If you interact with my video, more people will find me, and as all other knitting vloggers, I would like to get a foot in, you could say. I would like to expand my network of knitters, and I hope that you enjoyed this so much that you will help me expand the number of people who find my vlog, so that we can have a nice time together. So thanks for everything you're doing for me and for this vlog, and I hope to see you again.